One of the questions I got recently was how I came to settle on microbiology and immunology as my PhD area of study. And the person was wondering if I loved microbiology so much and if that was why I chose microbiology and immunology as my PhD area of study. And I think this is a question that a lot of students have about actually picking a subject area to study within your PhD. So in today's video, I'm actually going to answer how I came to pick microbiology and immunology as my PhD study of area, and also give you some tips on how you can go about choosing your PhD area of study. And as I share in today's video, if you already have a PhD or you're in a PhD program, I'd love it if you would leave in the comments below how you came about to choosing your area of study. All right, so in choosing an area of study for your PhD, I really think it's important to consider your undergrad, what you did in your undergrad. And I'm not necessarily talking about the degree you got during your undergrad. I want you to think about the subjects you enjoyed, because I'm sure that on the path to getting your degree, you took various classes. So maybe you took a class in epidemiology, maybe you took a class in microbiology, maybe you took a class in molecular biology. I want you to think about your experiences in all of those classes and what you really enjoyed. So before I applied to grad school, I already had 2 bachelor's degrees, one in biology and one in nursing. Why I didn't pursue nursing all the way is a whole other story, but I knew going into my PhD program that I wanted to understand the microbial basis for disease. When I was in my biology undergrad, I had taken a microbiology class and really enjoyed that. I never really enjoyed cell and molecular biology, but for sure microbiology and understanding the pathology of disease and the pathophysiology of disease was something I absolutely enjoyed through those first 2 degrees. And so going into a PhD, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. So when I was applying for PhD programs, I specifically would apply for programs that had anything to do with microbial pathogenesis, microbiology, and immunology, because I had been interested in those and enjoyed those classes in my undergrad, and I thought that those would be areas that I would enjoy pursuing a PhD in. The second thing I really want you to think about is to realize that when you go into a PhD, you're not going to be sitting in a classroom and learning theory for all the 5 or 6 years that you're there. I was in my PhD for about 5.5 years. In the United States, most biomedical PhDs tend to run between 5 to 7 years. Okay, and so you're not going to be sitting in a classroom the whole time. Actually, in most programs, the first 2 years are classroom work. You will be doing some lab work alongside that, but then after that you take an exam, you can become a PhD candidate, and then the rest of your time is spent doing research. Okay, now the reason I bring this up is because it's one thing to study something in a classroom, and it's a completely other thing to actually do research and be working on a research topic. And so noticing that this is going to be the case, I also want you to think about, if you're going to the biomedical sciences like me, like think about areas that you think you would love to do research in. So for instance, if you would like to do research and you're interested in sickle cell disease, then apply to programs and universities that have somebody within the faculty who is working on sickle cell disease. Or if you'd like to, work on malaria, then do the same thing. So really also be thinking about maybe disease processes or specific diseases that you would be interested in studying and interested maybe in pursuing future work in. And I think that that would be helpful. When I was going to my PhD program, I didn't have any disease in mind per se. I just knew I wanted to understand the microbial basis of disease, and so I applied for microbiology programs. What I did know after about a few months of being my PhD program is I didn't want to do pure bacteriology or to do bacterial genetics. That was not something I was interested in, but I was very interested in the labs that combined microbiology with the host immune response, for instance. So understanding that is also really helpful. So if there's a particular disease process that, again, during your undergrad, you studied about it and you got really interested, and there's some really cool research going on around that, I would suggest that you check that out, and I would suggest that you even maybe start conversations with those individuals that work in those fields even before you get into the PhD program, if you can. Another way to also gauge what your interest might be in a PhD program is to find maybe opportunities to shadow, find opportunities to intern, find summer research opportunities. Now, I know that this is not something that is widely available, and even for the summer research programs that are around in the US, they're pretty competitive, and so even if you apply, there's no guarantee you're going to get in. But something that is really low-hanging fruit, or something that may be fairly easy to get into, is finding somebody that is working in a field that you think you may be interested in and finding their email. I don't work in a lab. I don't want to do research as a principal investigator, which is why I'm a science writer and college professor. But if I was, I would be completely open to undergraduate students or students that may be interested in pursuing a PhD coming to my lab and maybe spending about a week or two just to get a sense of what happens in a lab environment. Because I can assure you that what you think happens in a lab is not what happens in a lab. I know this was true for me. When I was going into my program, my idea of what research was going to be was completely different. But thankfully, I enjoyed the process, so I'm not complaining. But once you are able to see what happens and what's expected of you, and people presenting their data and how experiments are run and how questions are formulated, when you get to see that whole process, even if it's just for a few weeks, it gives you a good sense of what to expect as you decide on where you would like to settle for your PhD. Now, I know I just told you all the ways that you can actually think about choosing a subject area, plus how I even landed on microbiology and immunology. But here is what I'm about to say doesn't negate everything I just said, but it's something to consider. Personally, I see a PhD as a skill building activity. It's a skill building activity for about 5 or 7 years of your life. If you check out this video that I did, I talked about the transferable skills that you gain in your PhD. So regardless of what you studied during your PhD, whether you pursue a degree in microbiology and immunology, or molecular biology, or chemical biology, or biochemistry, whatever it is that you end up choosing, realize that it's not necessarily about that subject as much as it's about all the skills you're going to gain on your PhD journey. And here's what I mean. If you watch that video, you hear me talk about those skills. But what I mean is, as a PhD student, regardless of what you end up studying, you are going to become an expert at doing research online, for instance, for literature, right, on literature review. So you'll become really good at researching peer-reviewed articles, of reading them and synthesizing that information. You're going to become really good at problem solving. You're going to become really good at taking your data and interpreting it and being able to communicate that to an audience. You're going to get good at so many things. So more than just the subject area, which I think it's important. If you're interested, again, if you're interested in microbial base of disease, if you're interested in a particular disease process, whatever it is you're interested in, I think you should pursue that. But more than that, you really have to see your PhD as a conduit to obtaining all these really, really valuable skills that, if you think about it, right, only about 2% of the world's population has a PhD. So here's the deal. you're getting skills that 98% of the world may not necessarily have. Yes, they could build that with their own self-education, but you get to be at the forefront of that, right? So I would take advantage of all the opportunities to build up those skills, and don't be afraid to ask and find out about even more opportunities. When I knew that after my PhD I would want to teach, because I did my PhD at a medical school, we were not allowed to be teaching assistants or anything like that. I didn't have teaching experience. But as I began to look for teaching roles, I realized that teaching experience is going to be important. So I remember asking my PI, I remember asking her, and she gave me an opportunity, right, to teach one of her classes and to give a lecture in one of her classes, and it was awesome. It was great. It was wonderful. A great experience, and I was able to like share some of that when I went for interviews for my teaching jobs, right? And so it's absolutely important for you to place even higher value on the skills that you're going to gain, because those skills can be translatable in so many incredible ways, way more than I would even say your actual area of study. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you found this video helpful, I'd love for you to share this video with somebody else. If you're here, you already have a PhD or you're in a PhD program, share in the comments below how you came about to choosing your area of study.